All right. And I am recording it. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Wanted to set up this Zoom for anybody that's interested in just learning some of the basics of dairy price risk management and hedging. The presenter today is Owen Feenstra. Is that correct?
That's correct.
From Rice Dairy and Ever Ag. And I believe, did y'all change your name or merged or something, I believe?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah. We can tell a little bit of that story too, but we're officially Ever Ag these days.
Okay.
I'm sure people will call us Rice Dairy for a while.
Yeah. Well, I get the emails and I'm like, the emails come from a different place, but they look the same.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you can share your screen whenever you want and go ahead.
Let me kind of kick this back to you too, Jeremy, a little bit, and maybe just if we could, maybe tell us a little bit about who you are, who's on the call, and maybe also kind of what drove people to want to be on this, and maybe what would some of the goals, what would their takeaways be for today?
Okay. Yeah, and there's 10 people on the call now. We had 14 signed up, so there may be a few more coming in as we go. There's some extension people, some people from the bank, some producers, and let's see, one person from a co-op, one person from the Department of Agriculture here. So what made me want to set this up is I've had a lot of questions. Of course, I'm an area ag agent in Central Virginia here, and I had a lot of questions from producers. Some producers can contract milk directly through a co-op. Some don't have that option. And we also have some that really don't want to do the subsidized insurance programs. So they're like, what are my options? What can we do? Do we have any options to sort of mitigate risk? And of course, after 2020, where we've seen prices go from record highs to almost record lows to back to record highs, and it's just been a little volatile, even more than normal, and it's normally volatile. So I just want to set this up. Obviously, we're not going to go through all the details of hedging, but just to get the basics and to see what options are, especially for small, mid-sized dairies, but for any dairy, basically.
Got it. And Jeremy, so you're an extension agent yourself?
Yes, that's correct.
And then are you affiliated with a particular university?
Virginia Tech.
Okay. So everybody in extension on here is Virginia Tech or
No, Brittany's with NC State.
And you guys are still buddies or able to talk to each other?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough sometimes, but yeah, no, it's the dairy industry is so small. We work together with as many people and colleagues from around as we can.
Got it. So as an area ag agent in extension, you guys maybe tell us a little bit too. You guys talk to dairy farmers and other agricultural producers too, or mostly dairy farmers, or?
Yeah, so I'm a dairy agent, so I work mostly with dairy farmers, but some agents are more general ag agents. So they work with any agriculture. In my area, we have almost 200 dairies here within a 50-mile radius of me. A lot of agents don't have that many. There might be a dozen that in their county or a couple county regions. So they do a lot more than just work with dairies, but they do. Some of them have dairy background. Brittany, you might be able to tell a little bit. North Carolina is a little bit different than what we are.
Yeah. So, hey, thanks for letting us tag along on this journey today. Briefly, I am associated with the Department of Ag and Resource Economics at NC State. So I specifically am extension and have dairy responsibility. So that answers that question. We do have field agents and specialized dairy agents who get, questions sometimes. And we don't have fieldmen, so to speak, or field women, field people, whatever the term is I'm supposed to use now, who collect financial data from farms. I'm sort of a one-person shop in North Carolina when it comes to dairy. which means I also get the questions that range from how do I forward contract my milk to what is my estate plan? What should it be? So, partly I participate in webinars like this just to strengthen the network of contacts where I can bounce questions to, because, being a jack of all trades doesn't help anybody when you get into real specific questions. And this is not my area of expertise. So looking forward to making a new connection with some of you folks.
Well, good.
Yeah, and Gonzalo is also on here. He's a specialist with Virginia Tech, and he does business management and some risk management, different things in the state here too.
Okay.
So yes, I'm a dairy management specialist, and actually, Brittany, I think we worked together a few years ago, right? Yeah. Okay.
We all get along. See, it's the
Say that again?
South. We get along.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we work together with. I work with the farmers, mainly doing a little more budgeting and so on. But I'm again, it's not my area of expertise, but through these workshops, I have heard some of these hedging tools, mainly from a colleague from Idaho. We gave some workshops to farmers in Idaho about hedging. But contrary to what Jeremy said, I'm interested today in a few of the tiny details. Okay, so we will see later on the questions if I can get some answers to what I need to know. Okay, that's all that I can say right now.
Okay, well, thank you. And I would say too, and maybe as Brittany, as you said too, about the connection, hopefully we shed some light on how we operate and how we help folks and what the options are for dairy farmers as we see them. But also a takeaway should be for you as just our contact information and stay in touch. So as questions pop up down the road, definitely feel free to reach out to us. And, because there's no way we'll cover 100% of it today, but it's always nice to be connected to people that are kind of, have the same goals and aspirations to help dairy farmers the same way we do, similar ways we do. So we can share ideas going forward too. And then, okay, so maybe some bankers on the phone. So the banks would be lenders to the dairy farms. I think I got a handle on that. The bankers. Sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, there's so Becky's a banker. She might be related to me. Hunter works for the Department of Agriculture here in Virginia. Matt's got a dairy, about 2,500 cows. Kevin is an extension agent down in Grayson County. So he grew up on a dairy farm, has a lot of dairy background, has 8 to 10 dairies, I think, are still down there. A small number of dairies, but he's kind of their go-to with his background. And then Dave works for a co-op. Is one of the, I don't know his exact title, but he works for one of the local co-ops here in the state. And their co-op does not have a direct connection to contracting milk either. So at this point.
Got it. All right. Any other, maybe we intro ourselves here and then we'll kind of dive into, we've got a PowerPoint, but I think it's more, we'll want to have dialogue on as we go through it as well.
Yeah.
My name is Brian Rice. I'm one of the founders of EverAg and one of the owners of the company also. And we did do a merger with another company last year that was a grain advisory business out of Platteville, Wisconsin. And prior to that, we'd spent, from when I founded it in 2002 up until last year, we just focused on dairy, laser focused, stuck to our knitting, and, went from starting out as just myself with no customers to a company of about 40 people with about 1,000 customers across the dairy value chain. And, we grew the team, we grew our services, but we always focused on the global dairy value chain. So from producers in the US to the commercial side of our customer business, which is more co-ops, processors, end users, banks that, take on risk and take price risk on. Anybody that would naturally take price risk on in their business, but they weren't milking cows themselves. And so that commercial customer base is actually global, even though the bulk is in the USA, but we got plenty of European customers, New Zealand, Oceania, New Zealand, Australia, a couple of Asian. And we got to the point where dairy farmers continued to ask us for help with their feed risk. And, for a number of years, we would say we can refer you to people, but that's just not what we do. And our customers let us know they got tired of that answer. So, we kind of went through an exercise of, do we hire grain people? Do we build it or do we buy it? And ultimately we decided to merge. We found the right company. Is called CRMG out of Platteville, Wisconsin. They were a company of about 15 to 20 people. They had very similar culture, very similar view about managing risk. They were serving mostly grain producers, a little bit of commercial and grain, but mostly grain producers. And they just had a really holistic view about risk the same way we did. So there weren't just a futures broker. They broker basis and cash. They looked at the whole marketing position from the viewpoint of that grain producer. So for us, that was a great look. And we spent about a year merging with them, and we piloted a few of our dairy farm customers, working with a few of the grain advisors to come up with a feed advisory service for dairy farmers. And we found the appetite there was, as expected, it was enormous. I mean, the dairymen are really looking for somebody that they could lean on from our standpoint for feed advisory and feed risk management. So about 3 months ago, we hired a director of feed advisory, and to be quite honest, I mean, we're building it from scratch. And our grain people have top-notch grain intelligence. They know how to market for a grain grower. But if you're growing corn, pretty straightforward. You got one crop. That's the crop you need to know. As anybody on this call could tell you, a feed ration is a little bit more complex than that. A few more things to manage than just one feed item. So the guy we hired, he's got his work cut out for him, but we think he's up for it. As a company, we're up for the challenge. And we're building that out as kind of one of the synergies of our merger with those guys. So that's our story as a company. Again, we've got maybe 1,500 to 2,000 customers that span the dairy value chain and grain production. Myself, I did not grow up on a farm. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Got into the futures industry when I was young, and that gave me exposure to everything: financial markets, foreign currency. I just gravitated toward agricultural markets. I liked them. They made sense to me. And the customers in there were farmers that were hedging their risk, as opposed to talking to, a Saudi fund manager, or, I just didn't really connect with some of the other customers the way I did with farmers. So I selected my way into ag, worked at a place called Iowa Grain Company for 4 years and really learned agricultural risk management there before starting Rice Dairy in 2002. And maybe Owen is somebody that joined us a couple of years ago. You could tell your story there too, Owen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Owen Feenstra, grew up in southern Arizona on a dairy farm. Went to school in the western suburbs of Chicago. Knew that risk management was something that, if I wanted to get back to the dairy farm, would be a large aspect of just the industry going forward. Had a lot of people pushing me in that direction, and it was something that I wanted to do, kind of put a business degree to use and learn that aspect of it. So I joined Rice Dairy about 2 years ago, and I specifically work with dairymen. I'm on our producer end, working alongside 6 other individuals. So my day in and day out responsibilities are talking to dairymen, helping them understand the markets, educate them on the markets, helping them navigate, the market and all the risks that obviously like 2020, the volatility, and just helping them educate them what is available to them as far as tools that they can have in their tool belt, on the milk side of things, how they can navigate the markets going forward, kind of helping set up risk management plans tailored to their specific farms, as no one specific risk management plan is the same for each guy, but that is my responsibility here, helping dairy farmers manage their risk. But yeah, that's my main responsibility. On the producer side, I will add, there's four of us now that come from dairy farms. Others that are on the producer desk grew up in ag backgrounds. One came from trading down in the pits and was very familiar with futures and options, and he's definitely an important piece of helping us make decisions surrounding the risk that dairymen have. But it's been quite an experience, and I've learned a lot in 2 years, and I know I have a lot more to learn, but I couldn't think of anything really better to do. I love the dairy industry. I love helping dairymen, and this is where I'm at, and happy to be doing it. So,
any questions, or should we kind of dive into some of the overview?
Yeah, why don't, if you want to just dive right into the overview, and then if somebody's got questions along the way, feel free to ask them or put them in the chat box. I'll try and monitor the chat box for you.
Let me share my screen here. Perfect. So, like Jeremy said, there are quite a few aspects to hedging, but this is something we put together that is just kind of going to cover the basics for the time being, and if more questions come about, we can answer those. So, kind of went into already a little bit of what we do here at EverAg. Rice covered that pretty well. We're risk management, so anything on the brokerage end as far as futures and options on the CME. As more insurance tools started getting released over the past couple of years, some looked very beneficial to dairymen, and as a risk management company, we latched onto those because we felt they would be of value. And then the grain solutions, and then we have provided some in-house technology for us employees and for our clients to kind of provide some interactive tools to help them understand, visually see where their risk lies, and also categorize and house all that. So
let me jump in there really quick on that last slide too, Owen, just to rehash there. That top bullet is our brokerage business. So for any customers that want to use the CME markets, options or futures, that's our business line there. And our customers there, they open an account with a clearing firm. In our case, ADM is our primary, and that gives them access to the CME markets. And we act as a broker there, just like if you had an account at Charles Schwab or Robinhood if you're younger or something like that, right? We're the brokerage company in that regard, and our compensation comes in the form of commissions. When our customers make a trade, a commission gets charged into their account, and that's how we get paid there. And that business also is the one that serves the commercial side of the business. So processors or co-ops, we work with a lot of them across the country, and if you're a co-op or a processor, the way we view you've kind of got 3 buckets of risk. The first bucket is your customer risk. You know, if you're processing that milk into butter, some of your butter customers are going to want to forward price the butter. And the way the proper way to do that is to have a forward contracting program where you back to back. You buy butter futures and then you sell that price forward to your customer. So you're transferring the risk. You're not taking it on yourself. The second bucket a co-op or a processor would have is their internal risk. Like, let's just say they made a bunch of butter, it's sitting in inventory, but they haven't sold it yet. They've got price risk on that inventory, right? If they're sitting at, if they made that butter at $2 a pound and the price of butter drops to $1.50 before they sell it, that's no good. That's going to hurt. So that's the second bucket of risk. The third bucket of risk that a co-op or a processor have is forward contracting to their dairy farmers. A lot of co-ops like to offer forward contracting to their dairy farmers so that, you know, as a member service. And we actually help run a lot of those forward contracting programs. And we use our fourth bullet point on here, EverAg Technologies, to help power that program too. So some of the processors and co-ops we work with, they white label our software and offer it out to their producers so that it just helps them see their risk and it helps them see any hedges they've got on and they can manage it. And I'll focus on that bottom one too, EverAg Technologies. We started building our own software about 5 years ago. It was expensive, it was painful. I felt like I was wandering the Sahara for a couple of years trying to figure out what it means to make software. But we learned, and we now have a team of 5 in-house software developers. We've got 2 more that we'll hire within the next month. I'll share with you too, when we first started, we were selling our software. So dairy farmers would have to pay an annual subscription or a monthly subscription fee to get the software. We changed that to any of our clients now get the software for free. And we've changed our pricing model that way. And it's actually really important because there's a whole breed of software out there called CTRM, Commodity Trading and Risk Management Software. Okay, so companies like Cargill and ExxonMobil, big companies created this software a long time ago because, I mean, if you're ExxonMobil and you've got 500 oil wells around the world, you need to measure how much oil are you producing at each location and what's your cost of production at each location. And now you're ExxonMobil and you've got futures contracts on, you've got options contracts on, you've got forward contracts with your customers. You need to be able to see your future production and your cost curves and any hedges you've got against it. So that if you want to stress test your portfolio of any financial positions plus your physical, you need to measure the net. All that matters is the net of your physical and your financial. The only reason you're doing financial in the first place is to protect your physical, right? So we took all of that best practice, all of that thought, and we customized it from the ground up for dairy farmers. So the dairy farmer can model out their physical farm with their actual cost of production, create a forward curve off of that, and then layer in any financial positions. And we automate it. So if you've got futures or options on, those positions automatically flow into your software. If you've got forward contracts on with your co-op, we can put that in there too. It's really helpful because a lot of times we find that any customer, commercials or producers, it can get confusing. You open an account with a clearing firm and all of a sudden you're seeing these profits and losses. Those are showing up transparently every day, but your forward physical doesn't show up in front of you every day until it hits home. So they open a hedge account and all of a sudden they're getting a margin call and they feel like they're losing or they're doing something wrong. It's really important to see that physical and financial laid against each other. And it also does a lot of handy stuff, like it measures per month your hedge gains and losses. And we can submit that to the banker because a lot of times dairy farmers will use a hedge line of credit with their bank to finance their hedge account, which is really important. and you want to keep that hedge line of credit trued up. And in order to do that the right way, you want to measure any hedges you've got in a specific month and turn it into a to the penny dollar amount. That's one thing we built inside the software that actually, it's not sexy, but it saves a lot of time and it increases accuracy. So at the end of the day, a lot of what we do is, I would sum up in the same way. It's a lot of what we do is a forward-looking accounting exercise. You know, we're not, we focus on working really hard on the markets and trying to understand where they could go, but it's less about, you know, being a crystal ball prediction guru. And it's more about doing the hard work of accounting and figuring out where your forward P&L is and how do you manage that using best practices. Any questions on the services that we offer?
I think I did see a raised hand. I don't know if that was on accident or somebody had a question for us.
Yeah, and that was me. Ryan, you said a lot. That it was very good. And as I said before, maybe in my case, I had a few specific questions. And when you started talking, I said, oh, that's my question. But then you kept going, and maybe I have more to add. But you said something like, as long as you start trading, we will charge a commission, right?
Yeah.
That is a typical question I receive from farmers that I cannot answer. Because even though I understand, like, the title of your presentation is the basics of hedging, I have never used it, okay? So, especially for a dairy farmer. So I know kind of the theory behind, but I do not have the practice. So let me put a specific question if you want. If I do one contract, I understand that it's going to be for 20,000 pounds of milk, correct?
200,000 pounds of milk.
200, yes, we're right. 2,000 hundredweights.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
2,000 hundredweights, yeah.
If I put I don't know, $16 per hundredweight, we are talking about $32,000, correct?
As the value of that milk, yes, that's right.
Right?
Yep.
So how do we translate that into the farmer? I've never seen this number, the size of a contract, in any presentation ever. I got this from Chicago Mercantile Exchange. How can we explain the farmer? Do they need to put $32,000 to start hedging? I don't think they do, right?
No, they don't. It's a great question. And you're right on that math, right? That's how much a contract is worth. There's the futures markets were built for hedgers. And it's the reason they're so highly leveraged. So the typical rule of thumb is the margin requirement is how much money you have to put up in your account to control a contract. So if that contract is worth $32,000, a crude rule of thumb is you're gonna have to post between 4 and 10% in margin.
Okay.
And that's there you go. That's the initial margin requirement, but as the market moves, you may be required to put more up.
Okay, so that's very good. So the 10% would be kind of what you need. So to a farmer, you should be putting about, I don't know, $3,000 in that account.
To start off, yes. And he may be required to put more in.
Okay, well, what about, sorry, I asked this so
Please.
silly. Okay, but how do you put the commission there?
Our commission,
without putting numbers, and don't put, I mean, it's going to be a percentage of that.
Nope.
3,000 or what?
We will be specific, and we're not squishy about numbers. It's best to be transparent, and we are that way. As an average, we're going to charge $45 per round turn per contract. A round turn just means you got into the contract. Let's say you're a dairy farmer, you sold a milk future, that's half the turn. And then at some point you're going to get out of it when it expires or whatever. That's the other half of the round turn. So $45 per round turn per contract. And
Okay.
each contract is, like you said, 2,000 hundredweights. So it's pretty small. If you look at that $45 divided by whatever that value was, 32,000 as a percentage, it's pretty small.
Right. Awesome. Yeah.
And that's the standard. And we charge that same dollar amount if you use an options contract. You know, and if a customer used one contract for the whole year, that would be 12 contracts or 12 commissions.
So is it fair to say if I do $45 divided the 2,000 hundredweights, this is the cost per hundredweight that you will be paying 2 cents of the dollar for just using the tool?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, this is very simplistic, but this is something that I see farmers need to do, you know, I didn't know this. So this is great.
It's actually a really good question. That's very important. That's what, if I was a customer of this, I would want to know that. You want to know what you're paying for it. And the other way we look at it too is say, what I would recommend to a dairy farmer if they were to open a futures account with us is add in cost of money to that, because you're going to need to set aside either you're going to get a hedge line of credit and the banker is going to charge you a fair interest rate. So you say, okay, I might need $100,000 set aside to fund this account for the next year. $100,000 times prime plus whatever, it might add another penny to that cost.
That's fine.
And it's actually one of the ways we look at it too, there's different tools that are out there. CME is one tool. A different tool is using forward contracting at your co-op. Average co-op will charge 10 to 15 cents per hundredweight for that service. And you could say, my gosh, that's a lot more expensive than doing it yourself on the exchange. It is, but you get other services bundled into it. I think co-ops charging 10 cents a hundredweight is a totally fair price. And we run those programs. We advise them they have to charge that much just to not make it a money losing proposition for them. And as we're talking to farmers and we're weighing the options for them, we'll say, okay, here's how you could do it on the exchange. It'll cost you, 3.5 cents all in, or you can do it through the co-op. It'll cost you 10 cents all in. Here's the pros and cons, and here's why you might want to do it that way.
Cool.
Dairyman might be going through an expansion and just does not have a lot of capital. In that case, it's worth spending the extra money and using the forward contracting program. So that's part of our job too, is to ask the right questions so that we know what's the right tool at the right time.
All right. Thanks. Sorry, I took you out of the script, Owen.
No, those are great questions, and I think hopefully the slides will add more clarity to a little bit of the questions that you're asking. If we're talking specifically brokerage and CME, as Rice just went into, there are a couple of tools within the CME that are available to producers, one being futures and the other being options in two forms, puts and calls. I like to think of futures as a fixed price. A dairyman is looking out into the future and saying, like Bryce said, for forward-looking accounting, hey, this is a margin. I know what I need back to me at the farm gate, that per hundredweight number that allows me to obviously keep going forward and works for me financially. And so whatever price that the market is showing us out into forward months on the exchange, you are allowed to go in there and buy or sell a fixed price. That would be how I would describe futures in a way that I guess makes the most sense, at least for me, when I was started learning these tools, you know, thinking about a fixed price, that was the best way to break it down. So as you were saying, Gonzalo, like one contract is 200,000 pounds, 2,000 hundredweights. If that is what the farmer's exposure is, that he's making close to that per month, looking out into the future, he knows that that is the volume, or however many contracts broken down, that he would try to set that fixed price at. Now, this is just like one option that I had said, but to kind of dive in a little bit to the intricacies of a future, what we're trying to do in the financial realm is match what we're going to be doing on farm later down the road. And what I mean by that, it's a little vague, is I know that as a dairyman down the road, I need to sell my milk. And so what we can do through the exchange is we can mirror that on-farm action and get rid of the volatility and risk of milk prices dropping and going out onto the exchange. And on, say, one contract, if the market is presenting to us at the time $17.40, let's say in April, and I know that $17.40 works for me as a dairyman, that can create a margin, then I can go out there and I have the ability to sell a 1740 future. I'm mirroring what I would be doing on the farm for a later date. I hold the milk, that is my risk, or my risk is that the price would drop, so I'm going to go out there and I'm going to sell the milk to hedge a decrease in price, what I would be getting back on farm through my co-op or my handler. So in the realm of selling futures, you can also buy futures, but because we're trying to match the risk of what we're doing on farm, a dairyman would look at futures and come from the selling perspective if he's trying to one-to-one hedge his farm. So if I were to go out, a dairyman, and sell 1740 futures, that means that as I've sold $17.40 futures, every penny below $17.40, I am receiving back into my account. It's a fixed price. I've sold $17.40 out into the future. Anything above that, I am unable to participate in. And that is money that the market may be going higher and I'll receive a higher price on my milk check. But as far as the financial position that we've put on, the 1740 I've locked in. Anything below I am participating in, and that's money coming to me. Anything above 1740 is I will not be participating in that price action, and that will be drawn away from me. So I just created this chart to kind of visually play it out. If we were to go and do 1740 futures, and if we see down here at 1545, I would be made up the difference. I kind of broke it down a little bit further here. I sold 1740 futures, and if markets were to settle at 1632 at the end of the month that I sold futures in, my profit would be $1.08 per hundredweight. Any questions? Any questions on this? Now, as I said, you'll not be able to participate in anything above 1740 if we sold futures at that price. Anything above the price that we sell, we're not participating in. So if we sold in April 1740 futures and the market finishes, the month expires at 1859, I've lost $1.19 per hundredweight in my futures account. Most likely, hopefully, I made that up on my milk check because market prices did rally and go to a higher point. So it's a straight fixed price. We're participating in anything lower than the price that we sold. Anything above, we're not participating in. Now, the other tool that I had mentioned was options. I like to think of options using insurance terms. It's not insurance outright, but I feel like it's the best way to kind of grasp exactly what options can do for us. Now they come in two forms, puts and calls. One would be insurance for upside price action. Think of an end user who needs to buy cheese, and as a buyer, they don't want to be buying cheese in a higher price market. They want to be purchasing something as low as they can. So they would go in there and purchase a call to purchase the product that they're trying to buy at a lower price. But thinking from a dairyman's perspective, we are worried about our downside risk. And so what we can do is go in there and buy a put. In futures, what Raisa talked about is we're posting a margin. We're telling the exchange that we're doing a fixed price and we are financially capable of taking a loss on this contract. And in the realm of options, in futures, we couldn't participate in anything above 1740. But in options, now we are just paying insurance for a certain price point. And I'll go into that right here to kind of spread a little bit more light on that. So as in futures, we couldn't participate in anything above 1740. But in the realm of options, we are going to be paying a premium, so many cents per hundredweight, to protect that 1740 price that we know that we want. If the market price goes below 1740, now the 1740 insurance price that we're holding is triggered, and we know that we are in a position that we are able to have protection from 1740 and lower. If the market moves higher than our 1740 option, our put option in this case, then we are still participating in the upside, but the only risk that we had, our only expenditure, was what we paid for the put. So I like kind of think of it in insurance terms. I will kind of spread a little bit more light on that, how that works right here. I bought this 1740 put for 15 cents per hundredweight. My 15 cents per hundredweight is the only money that I put up for this option. If the market goes to 1632, the value to me is that I have a 1740 put. The market is, say the market expires at 1632. The difference between the two is I have 93 cents minus what I paid for the put, 15 cents. But if it were to go to 1755, then I know I paid 15 cents for the option. Anything above 1755, I'm still participating in. The only thing that I gave up was my 15-cent premium that I put into this strategy. Further explained here, 1740 put, say the month that we buy the put in, the market expires at 1859. There's no value in the put because the market moved against our position. If it's 1859 or 1860, we know back on farm, if our milk check is accounting for basis, if that's what we're going to be getting on our milk check, then we know that we have 1845, taking away the 15 cents that we paid for the insurance, the option. Any questions thus far on the options?
How are the premiums determined?
Yeah, so option premiums are determined by a few things: market volatility, time until expiration of the contract. There are option pricing. There are a couple of things that go into it, but I would say that those are the two that we're watching for producers, would be volatility, time until expiration. If we are trying to buy an option on a futures contract on a market that's 6 months, 7 months down the road, we're paying for the time value, the unknown that can happen within that contract, because we don't know exactly what's going to be happening out there at that time. Once the month that we are purchasing the option then expires. Volatility will also play into the price of an option. If we know that the market, say 2020, for example, almost this whole entire year has been very volatile. As the markets are reacting violently to things going out in the industry, you're going to be paying more for the ability to participate in a price. There are more factors that go into options pricing, but those are the two that I like to focus on for right now, and we can definitely dive into that even further. Arthright, if you have anything to add, maybe about option pricing.
I will add another layer to that in the sense that Owen's exactly right. The factors that drive it, but at the end of the day, options are priced the same way physical cheeses or milk futures or grain futures. They are determined through price discovery in the open market, through supply and demand. So each day we've got that auction at the CME for block and barrel cheddar cheese or butter. And what happens is all the buyers and sellers, they concentrate into that auction. And if there's a time period where, cheese orders are not good, whatever, the bearish factors outweigh the bullish factors, that spot cheese market's going to go down that day. That's a daily price discovery process. And then the settlement gets broadcast to the world. And that settlement price is the result of a glimpse of supply and demand. Same thing with the futures prices every day. It's like there's an ongoing auction every day that's constantly rediscovering the price. Same thing is true for options. What happens is if all of a sudden there's a lot of demand for buying premium or buying call options, buying put options, that's going to inflate the value. And conversely, if people are looking forward into 2021 and they think, geez, there's just not going to be much going on, there's no chance milk is going to be above $20, I'm going to sell all the $20 calls I can. As supply for selling options comes in, the premiums get crushed. As demand for options goes up, the premiums get pumped up. So those mechanisms that Owen talks about, that's right. But if you take a step back in a 30,000 foot view, it's the open market that's constantly determining those values. It's not like the exchange or a couple individuals that set it or an actuary at an insurance company. It's not that. It's the open market function every day that resets it. So I'll say one more thing too, the structure of a futures contract or the function of it, right? It's a fixed price, or the function of an options contract where it's you're buying a floor price or buying a ceiling price, or those are the building blocks of what's on the exchange. You can combine them together to create the to change the functionality. And I should say too, that if you're using a forward contracting program at a co-op, even though it's a different venue, you're going to have the same tools. Most co-ops just offer the most basic thing they start by offering is fixed price, forward fixed price, which is the same function as a futures contract. But a lot of forward contracting programs offer an option type structure too. They'll call it a floor, they'll call it a min-max. There's a lot of different names for them. But once you understand this is what a futures contract is, and this is how it functions, and this is an options contract, and this is how it functions, you can basically, then it's a matter of, okay, what venue do I want to do that on? Do I want to do it on the exchange, straight at it, forward contracting? There's over the counter, there's insurance, but ultimately, understanding those core building blocks can kind of help you understand any type of hedging instrument that's out there.
Yeah, well said. So yeah, I mean, for options, I just like thinking about it as I'm paying my risk. My risk is defined. I'm paying to insure myself if the price gets to a certain point, and that is it. If the market goes higher, I'm happy that I spent the 15 cents or whatever the premium may be, because hopefully on farm, I'm participating in higher prices. If we feel like there is some risk out there in the future months along the curve, then this is kind of where risk management comes into play in creating, you know, a tailored plan per dairy, you know, working with the producer, thinking, you know, per month, what can I budget towards, you know, purchasing options, or what can I put forward to a risk management plan to ensure that I'm not participating in lower prices. And then kind of working with the producer saying, hey, if it's 10 cents or if it's 25 cents or 35 cents, then, you know, this is what's available to us at that price. And we can get even more granular as far as, you know, what actual market prices that we want to be putting options on or using futures. But in the realm of futures, our risk is the risk profile in futures is going to be different from options. Options, I know what my risk is. It's the one-time payment that I'm paying for my option. In futures, it comes back to exactly what we were talking about earlier in our margin account. If I know that I'm putting a fixed price on at 17.40, anything below that I'm participating in. Any penny below 17.40, I'm receiving into my account. Any penny above 17.40, it's being taken out. We talked a little bit about margin. I feel Rice did a really good job on kind of explaining that. If you have any further questions, happy to answer them now as well. I know we talked about that there probably wouldn't be a lot of interest on the insurance side of things, but it is a tool that is available to dairymen. Dairy Revenue Protection, I don't know if who's all familiar with it, but it is, we see it as risk managers to dairymen that it is a product that came out, and because of the expertise that EverAg had within the dairy markets, working on the CME, this tool so closely mirrors what is happening on the CME. And it was something that we were able to latch on because we understood all the working parts of it. In I guess a 30,000 foot view, a summarized view of it is, instead of the month-to-month risk that you can manage on the CME, now this gives dairymen the opportunity to go out there and lay away swaths of risk a quarter at a time, and matching that insurance to exactly what their risk is on farm. If they're a high component herd and they are, say, a Jersey herd running high components, then we can tailor that insurance to more match the extra pounds of butter, fat, and protein that they're producing. If they're shipping to a class 3 plant, we would focus in the class 3 as well as the class 4 realm. It's taking the average of the 3 futures that are a part of the month of the quarter and taking an average of those every single day at the end of the settle, and then choosing a coverage percentage level of that average, anywhere from 80 up to 90 or 75 up to 95%, an average, that percent of that average, and you're paying a premium to protect that quarter's revenue risk at that price. It is very liquid. It's cash flow friendly, and that premiums are not due until so many days after the quarter. So it's not, you know, paying for that premium up front. If you're owed an indemnity, then beyond your premium, then your premium just taken out of that indemnity. But that is one thing that producers have been keen on, is that, you know, it's not money due up front. It's only after the quarter expires, and it allows them to, like I said, lay away swaths of risk at a time, up to 5 quarters out. In addition to that, I think one thing that allows us to be pretty sharp around the DRP and the CME is when DRP came out, because we are already using the CME day in, day out, we have found ways that we can use the DRP and CME in tandem, ways to manage that quarterly risk versus monthly risk, the difference between the two, and ways to sell options or use option strategies to finance the DRP if the premium is to not somebody's liking. But the ability to use both for producers that are interested in DRP, it has worked to our advantage that we know the two venues very well, and we can even more tailor a risk management plan to the producer, knowing that we can use both venues to offset risk and cheapen things up if need be, to create a more custom plan for the dairyman. But I think today's focus was a little bit more on the
Hey,
tool.
Owen, you got a raised hand out there, I think. Did I see that?
Okay.
Is that you, Gonzalo? Did you have a?
Yeah, that's me again. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, one question that I received in the past about the DRP was, when COVID hit, some people started to dump milk, and that obviously affects the revenue. Is there any way on considering that reduction in the revenue in DRP? I don't know how to word this in the right way, sorry. But can you see the picture? You're losing production, you're not selling that, you are reducing your revenue. Is that something that this is going to cover?
Yeah, so there are a few ways that we take that into account, and then the program does as well. There's one component of the DRP insurance tool called the protection factor, and it allows you to go out and insure above 100% of what your actual on-farm production is, accounting for scenarios where you may be in a situation where I may have to dump milk, or that is going to affect my bottom line revenue that I'm going to be receiving at the end of the quarter. Another way that the program accounts for dumped milk or a loss of yield is that there is one part of the program called the yield factor. It's a per cow per quarter month projected and developed by the USDA, saying, hey, when I put on coverage, I'm also locking in a yield number per cow per quarter. And because it is a revenue protection program, if at the end of the quarter, after the milk production reports have come out and the USDA has done the math backwards to calculate, what was the yield for this state, if there is a loss in yield, they are acknowledging that and saying, hey, this state created less milk, therefore less revenue, and that is factored into what is the total indemnity. That yield factor can work for you or against you. If the yield is -2%, then they're going to account for in that indemnity the 2% that you lost to make you whole on the revenue that you would have lost from that. It's not necessarily looking at straight market prices. It is good to think of it from the realm of what it is, revenue protection. What's the total revenue that we are protecting? So that's a great question, though. There are ways to use the protection factor, and it is wise to stay on top of what are yields looking like in my region, what yield am I locking in when I put on this insurance, and understanding the working of that as what it means to my revenue.
So if I follow you correctly, for example, the dairy margin coverage,
Yes,
it's an insurance tool, and you depend on milk price. Obviously, you depend on the feed prices, right?
yeah.
So it doesn't cover whatever you are actually shipping out of the farm. It's more on the market side, if you want.
Mhm.
In this case, if you actually have a COVID catastrophe, or what about a drought? Would that lack of revenue cover you there? No.
So I will say specifically to COVID, that was a major concern. Was there were supply management programs going in place across the U.S. and specific to COVID, the RMA was not counting for the dumped milk. They were saying if you insured, if you declared this amount of production, that is what you're going to be insured upon. When it comes to a drought and a yield and things, say, outside of a black swan event like COVID, that is where you would use the protection factor to make sure that you are locking in a certain amount of revenue.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
I think so. I'm not an expert in DRP. I need to learn more maybe to ask better the question.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
no.
would say too, in a simple way, is that the DRP is going to pay out based on a state average, not based on the individual production of a dairy farm.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, the dairy farm, if they're going to get paid an indemnity, they do have to produce their milk receipts to prove that they made it.
Yeah.
Right.
So if there's some particular production event that affects one dairy farm, then they could have an issue there. But it's, now you're talking about something really unusual, like, the only story I can think about is that one dairy out west, Owen, that got weird Air Force Base.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it does not cover that on-site risk of something going, completely backwards. If there's a mix-up in the ration or something gets into, something to protect to jeopardize what the on-farm production and yield is. I will say though that the reason that when they were creating this program, why they put in the protection factor is that most of it, through talking with some of the people that created this, was because they were thinking of, I don't know if you guys remember in 14-15, New Mexico, the mammoth storm that went in. New Mexico as a whole, I think, lost close to 40,000 cows. Now, the USDA doing a milk production report on that state, the yield obviously was very much affected, and the milk output on that state was there. The protection factor is something that allows you to go in and insure yourself against maybe a freak accident or freak weather event like that happening. And it allows you to go in and insure up to 150% of your production. But like Rice said, when it comes down to revenue loss because of an on-site problem, that does not necessarily cover that exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I got a question here. Could you talk a bit about a dairy RP, an example of an area with class 1 utilization? The Southeast, we're 85% class 1 utilization most of the year. How does that affect, or does it have an effect on dairy RP utilization?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And this gets a little bit into milk pricing, but we know that because the way the class 1 equation is, it is dependent on what's happening in the class 3 and class 4 market. And when you break that down, milk pricing can get a little fuzzy and hazy. But when you're looking at producers with class 1 exposure, we are covering that milk 50% class 3 and 50% class 4 because of the makeup of the class 1 equation, knowing that its risk lies in ultimately what class 3 and class 4 are doing.
And so that's, to back up what Owen's saying that's our basic measurement of risk. Is we take that, we want to know, okay, how much class 1 risk is in your milk check. And with our software, if you tell us what county you're in, we can guess probably, as accurately as anybody else can, what their expected class 1 portion of their pay price is going to be. And this is part of our discussion that we have with every customer. What is your milk check made up of? What portion class 1, what portion class 2? You know, less of a factor for you guys in the Southeast, but you know, we work with Idaho dairies too that get paid on a cheese yield. Our first step is measuring risk with precision. And that means understanding what makes up that milk check. And that's just part of the, before any hedges are ever made, we gain an understanding of what's the actual risk we're measuring before we start managing it. And that class 1 bucket is exactly as Owen said. Okay, so if we say, wow, your milk check is 30-40% class 1, great. Now we know we're going to treat that as 50% 4, 50% 3 with a high degree of confidence. That's how it's going to show up in your milk check.
Yeah, no, it like Ray said, a lot of times it does, you know, that conversation does need to be had. There's been multiple occasions where we've had producers come to us and say, you know, last year I was insured with so-and-so, and on the calculator, the insurance calculator, it looked like I could lock up $23 milk. When you look at their milk check and you look at their, you know, their milk marketing organization, the statistics of that and how their milk is broken down and how it's utilized, it turns out that they're more a heavy class 4 shipper than class 3, and how they hedge their milk was incorrect. It's always that discussion of, you know, reaching out to the co-op, working with the dairyman, looking at their milk check one-on-one, saying, you know, how can we get this 1-to-1 as close as we can, hedge your milk, how it's going to be coming to you through your milk check. So that's definitely an important aspect of trying to, you know, hedge, making sure that you're doing it correctly based off of your utilizations.
I think as a takeaway for everybody on this call, as you're talking to producers out there, this is not a Owen Feenstra or Brian Rice thing. I didn't create it. It's just a best practice that before you can manage risk, you got to be able to measure it with precision. That's just, and it's something that unfortunately we see people skipping that step, and it gets you to like the old adage of, instead of ready, aim, fire, it's ready, fire, aim, right? You don't want to do that. You want to be working with methodically and with precision, because there's real dollars at risk for that dairy farm. If you're just winging it and guessing what their risk is without measuring it the right way, that's a lot of you could be adding risk to that dairyman. So, you know, you don't need to be working with us, but just understand, like, that's a core fundamental best practice that you guys are well equipped to help dairy farmers with, is always take a beat, take a pause, and be like, hey, let's talk about what your risk is exactly first. Before we talk about what tools, should it be a put or a call or a future, before we even get there, what is your risk? That's always kind of step one. And we, you know, we've gotten, that's baked into our software too. We have a milk check calculator that you just type in what county is this producer in, and it shows a 3-year average of their utilization by that county. So that, and we pull that up and we look at it on screen share like this, or face to face with the dairy farmer. And we're like, does this look like your milk check? All right, can we actually go to the point? Can we see some of your milk checks? We want to see, we don't want to assume that we know what your milk check is composed of. Again, back to that, we're you can tell we're pretty methodical about making sure we measure that risk before we start advising on how to manage that risk.
So would you be able to describe the profile of the farmers that use these tools, either the forward, the options? Where I'm going is, in the state of Virginia, there are a lot of small dairy farmers, if you want. And I don't think, correct me here, Jeremy, I don't think there are many using this type of tools unless they are the big ones. Would you agree there, Jeremy?
Yeah, there's not very many using straight on the CME futures and
Right.
options anyway. Few using DRP, but yeah, not too many.
Right. So can you describe, I mean, I know I hate to put everybody on the same box, but how is the profile of the typical farmer using hedging, for example? Are those big farmers? Are those very progressive type of farmers with a lot of financial background, or that's what I imagine? Okay, am I wrong thinking this way?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, our average size dairy farmer is bigger. They've got a couple thousand cows. And it's not that we say, hey, we're only working with big farmers. It just they're the ones that self-select into managing their risk. But we've got plenty of dairymen that are, way below that average, into a couple hundred. And one of the things that we're always trying to get, there's a hurdle and we recognize it. I'm sure a lot of the dairymen in Virginia would hedge, but there's some things that'll hold them back. And part of it is, I'm going to reach out to some guy in Chicago and he's going to get me set up in a financial account and he's going to be picking my pocket somehow. I don't know what's good. You know what I mean? There are barriers out there that are understandable. And it's also, a lot of guys in my business have been shitty at explaining what we do. We revel in the Greeks of options and talk about our lingo, and people are like, what the hell are these dorks talking about? So there are barriers to people getting in, other than the dairy farmer just saying, this doesn't make, I don't want to do it. There's other barriers on top of that. And part of it is on us to try and break those down a bit. One of the things that we've seen in overcoming that barrier is exactly what happened in the Feenstra family. You've got dad generation that's like, hey, I didn't do this shit growing up. Why do I need to now? But at the same time, he's like, this seems like this is the future. Oh, and you go figure it out.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But not every family's got an Owen in the wings, So that's another challenge that's out there. But I don't know, Owen, maybe from your perspective, talk about some of the dairymen that you work with that have contemplated managing risk, or never gotten over the hump to manage risk, or those that have.
Yeah, no, I work with an array of sizes of dairies. I work with multiple that are 150, 100 cows, and I work with some that are upwards of 4,000 cows, 5,000 cows. And I think at the end of the day, it, sadly, what sometimes bring guys to the discussion is going through really, really tough years like 2020 and coming to the realization that, hey, if I want this to be sustainable, this is something that I want to do pass down, then I need to start somewhere and have the conversation. That's why conversations like this are so great. And I feel that. And so like Rice said, my dad, our own family farm back home, it was something that he never participated in, but realizing, looking from where he started to where the dairy industry is now, volatility has become something that's pretty regular, and there are a lot of unknowns and things that sometimes show up in the dairy industry that we're not prepared for. And if there's tools that are available to us to help mitigate that risk, then that discussion needs to be had. And I think that's been, there have been some 150 cow dairies that have come to me because they've been thinking, risk management is what my neighbor's doing, so maybe I should be thinking about it. And they maybe weren't necessarily spurred on because of a dramatic, milk market move that brought them to the table. But I don't think there are, like Rice was saying, sometimes it is just having a discussion, working through those barriers to entry. But I do believe through the tools that are available that we can try as hard as we can. We're going to try to find something that fits for your operation. It's not only a a part of dairy management that is reserved for the 1,500 cow dairy.
I'd just like to ask a question, kind of building off of that conversation. Is there certain milk production levels where some of those tools go off the table, or do you see like a level at which, and I'm thinking more in terms of a production level versus a herd size, because we're talking about marketing milk more than marketing a herd size. So is there a production level there where some of these tools make more sense or less sense?
Of course. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So on the CME, we talked about the 200,000 pound contract. That is for the dairy contract, for the futures contract, that is the minimum, the 200,000. There's also another option contract that can cover 100,000 pounds. And we're in that realm. We also, work with that contract. It's not a very popular traded contract. Doesn't mean it can't be used. As far as thinking around the 200,000 pound, contract and the limitations of that come with that, for people who are open to doing, DRP or looking into other, insurance products around the dairy market, there's essentially no minimum on the DRP realm or LGM. Those can cover, very, very small amounts of milk. But there is that 200,000 pound limitation that I would see on the CME. A forward contracting desk, a lot of the times too, will work with volumes that are less than 200,000 pounds. I can't guarantee that because I don't know exactly what the forward desk with the co-op that is around there, but that is something that we have seen, and Rice, correct me if I'm wrong, that because the way that the forward contracting desk works for co-ops, that is usually done through a realm like Rice called OTC, and you can kind of tailor those volumes to what's being asked to sell. But that would be my answer to that.
Let me build off that too a little bit there, Kevin, and say it what Owen is saying just a different way. The CME is the least flexible for the smaller guys. So if you're making, the contract is 200,000 pounds of milk per month. If you're producing that exact amount, that means your choice as a dairy farmer now is I'm going to go 100% unhedged or 100% hedged. It's a big decision to make because most of the dairy farmers we're working with will say, hey, you've got no hedges on right now. As we look out in the calendar in 2021, let's start with 20% in this area and using this tool. As time goes on and the markets move around, let's layer in another 20%. If 200,000 pounds of milk is your total production, you lose that strategy to layer yourself in. So for somebody that's making around that amount of milk, you're going to be better off using DMC or DRP or forward contracting than you are jumping into the exchange. Just because it's we could say this is all on an Excel sheet, but at the end of the day, these are major human emotions that go into these decisions. And if your only choice is 0% hedged or 100% hedged, that's hard. That's hard for even the most robotic mind like mine to live with because you're all one way. You know what I mean? But forward contracting will allow you to, if you're producing 200,000 pounds of milk per month, all right, well, let me go layer in 20,000 pounds of a hedge right now. And then I could do another 20 later. It works better over time in our experience.
So
sorry, one more thing
Go ahead.
I want to highlight too. Risk management is not just for the big guys. I mean, I think for 100 cow dairy, they could and should be managing their risk too. It's just a matter of what's the right tool.
Yeah.
So I know we're getting close to 2:30 here, and I said this will only go till 2. So I'm not gonna cut y'all off. I don't know what your schedules are if you're time bound, but so I did have a question. So what the typical person that or farm that you work with, are they doing this, they're contracting every month or every quarter, or are they, well, I'll contract now, and they'll do one contract now, and maybe a year and a half from now they'll call you and be, I'm doing another contract. They dabble a little bit, or they're pretty consistent where they're doing portions at a time. What does an average person do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the effectiveness of risk management is proven effective when it is consistent, and it is month in, month out, knowing what my risk is and sticking to being consistent with it. Obviously, guys, if they are within, if are all producers, not necessarily guys, if they are flexible in using the CME alongside DRP, how it's split up is sometimes not always the same, but bottom line, I think risk management is most effective when it is a consistent, month in, month out, or quarter in, quarter out. The producers that I work with I would put in a very consistent, I would label them as that. Yeah.
For sure. It's a business practice. It doesn't mean you're hedging every day, but it means you're committed to kind of building that muscle inside of your company to be able to manage risk.
Yeah, it's creating something dependable within the business plan. If I'm hedging, months out at a time, I'm able to make other on-farm management decisions, knowing that I have, say, a $16 floor in, or a floor that I know that I can, create my financials around and make other decisions based off of.
All right.
Can I throw a simplistic equation here and see if I'm picking up the rationale here? So if I think about a contract of 200,000 pounds, and I'm a small dairy farmer from Virginia with an average production of 70 pounds per cow per day. Okay, that if I divide the 200,000 pounds divided 70 pounds, we are talking about 2,857 cow days, which if I divide that by my 100 cow herd, that means that I'm hedging my 28 days of the month. I mean, it's not crazy to do this in my mind. Am I right with this rationale? I can repeat it if you need it.
Yeah, so it's 200,000 pounds for the month.
Divided
70 pounds a day.
70 pounds per day. Okay.
Yeah.
That is going to give you the equivalent cow day. That is going to give you the equivalent of 2,800 cow days. Okay. If you divide that by 100 cows, let's say that you have 100 milking cows. Okay. That means that one contract is the equivalent of your production for 28 days. So you are securing the price for the production of your month. So in my mind, here is where the question is, why not small dairy farmers? You don't have to be a dairy farmer to secure your production.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, you're right, Gonzalo. It just in practice over the years, we find that the dairymen are more comfortable doing a portion of forward contracting a portion of their milk at a time, as opposed to all of it at once.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Right or wrong, that's the way they end up doing it. We do have, the rare client that they'll call us once a year and say, lock me up for the next year, everything, and don't call me until next year, click. Oh, wow. And that's not wrong. That's not wrong. It comes down to personality type. We just find that the majority of dairy farmers, they like, kind of thinking about it, consulting about it once a week, a couple times a month, and, taking bites and chunks here and there.
Yeah.
How far out does your typical farmer contract milk?
Within the first,
Depending on go ahead, Rice.
I was going to say within the first year is typical.
No, I mean, how like if I'm contracting today, how far in the future are they contracting?
Oh, sorry. That's what I mean. So like you on the exchange, you can do up to 2 years out.
Mm-hmm.
And on DRP, you can do up to 5 quarters out. So a year and a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
But in practice, most dairy farmers stick within that first 12 months.
Yeah.
But Owen kind of highlighted it before in DRP, we'll see them bite off that 5th quarter more often, partly because they don't have to post all the money up front. It just DRP, the structure of it makes it easier to hedge further out. But on average, I mean, just as an average, Jeremy, to answer your question, it's they typically hedge within the front 12 months in front of them. So for today, they wouldn't be going beyond December 21.
So I've got a couple questions and a comment. Back to the comment about, I think Jeremy's question regarding the in and out. In my mind, that's not risk management. If you're not in it consistently, it's not risk management. But anyway, I'm curious for a couple things here. First off, practically speaking, if I've got a dairyman looking to explore working with you all on risk management, so would they, if they went and they were working with you, Owen, would they work with you only on the milk and then maybe another person there on the feed side? So there maybe be a team of folks there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on the dairy side, if we were to start that process, yeah, I would be their point on, whatever venue that they wanted. We decided that we wanted to manage the risk on. On the feed side, I would start the conversation with the grain advisor, and I would have them be in most all conversations with the dairyman or them two on their own. But I would pair them with a grain risk advisor.
Then my last question, this is related to the CME, the brokerage stuff. And this is more out of just curiosity, I guess, is how much is there non-ag interests in the CME as far as moving those markets? Is there much speculative stuff going on in there, or can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's, there in dairy in particular, there's a lot less financial money in that market as a percentage of the overall trade. So let's just say in a given day, 3,000 contracts will trade in the whole CME dairy market. Of those 3,000, let's just say 20% is these financial players that don't have a dairy farm, they don't have a cheese company, they're not banking, you know what I mean? They're just purely financial players. So we look at a ratio and say, of the volume that trades in the market, how much are these financial players? The ratio in dairy is way smaller than it is in crude, corn, cotton, copper, right? And partly because dairy is still a young financial market, and it's still smaller than, it hasn't been around as long as those markets. It's not as developed. So the financial players, they're not as attracted to it yet. And therefore, we've got less daily volume in our market. So dairy, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, people that are really cautious or skeptical of these financial players, they can say, oh, we're happy. There's not really that many financial players in dairy. But on the other hand, the flip side of that coin is, well, liquidity is low. Sometimes it's a little hard. If we've got a big commercial customer that wants to trade 2,000 contracts, well, I can't just push the button and get them filled like I could in corn or crude. In dairy, you got to painstakingly work that order to try and get it done. So like everything in life, there's trade-offs, and And that's the case here too. Dairy, we don't have a ton of financial players in the market, and it shows up in the liquidity. Does that kind of answer? where
Yeah,
you're at?
yeah, it does. It does.
Uh,
Well, and I think you added even more there than I expected, because with that whole conversation of having that liquid cash in the market, and its role.
I learned early, somebody used an analogy that helped me think about it. Like those speculators, those financial players, they're like the grease in the wheels of the market. They help it all work. You know, do they sometimes add to volatility? Sure, but so do farmers, and so do cheesemakers. I don't look at speculators as inherently bad or good. We live in a capitalist system, and they're important parts of the market. And the machine works better when there's grease in the wheels. I'll tell you that.
All right, thanks so much. I think this was good, and hopefully answered a lot of questions. And if you need to reach out to Brian or Owen, the website is ever.ag, I believe, and you can get a hold of them that way.
Yeah, no, I can send over my
Mhm.
just my info to you, Jeremy, too. If
Yeah.
you would send that
Yeah, and
out.
I have your email and stuff. So
Perfect.
yep.
Yeah, but we're always open to helping guys, get through decisions, and that's what we're here for, to help out. So
Yeah, please include my info too, and anybody on this call, reach out anytime.
Thank you, guys.